How do you prepare for a flight review? If you're a brand new private pilot, or if you have advanced in ratings beyond the private pilot level, but you are young enough in the industry that you've never had a flight review before, you may be wondering what it encompasses and what to expect. My name's Carly. I'm an independent flight instructor in Tennessee, and I teach people how to fly airplanes from zero experience. A lot of the training that I do give is flight reviews. I do a lot of just one-off sessions for people. Either they'll bring their airplane in to me, or I have a rental company that I work through that I can provide an aircraft for training if needed. My first one ever though, when I gave my first flight review ever, it was to a person who had 13,000 flight hours. I had graduated from a 141 school, so by the time I completed training, I had probably around 230 flight hours, something like that, because at a 141, you don't have to hit 250 to become a commercial pilot, all of that. So I had very, very few hours. And I felt completely out of my league giving a flight review to someone with so much time. But that's how this industry works. It feels crazy, and I felt like I was doing something wrong, but you better believe I was studying my butt off for this flight review to make sure that I didn't miss anything, make sure that I covered all the bases. The reason I told this story on social media was because this gentleman did not really take me seriously. At the end, I thought, okay, great, it's over and I don't have to talk to him anymore. But when he handed me the check to pay for my time, he said, if you were 15 pounds heavier, you would be at your peak. Not everyone is like that. I only tell that story because it was such a shocking moment for me as a brand new CFI. I'd never taught a single lesson. I was so nervous, and then this person just clearly did not respect me at all. And from that moment on, I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna tolerate that, and I'm not gonna ever work with him again. And I'm gonna be looking out for red flags in the future so that I don't have a similar encounter. Anyways, fun little story for you. Let's talk about how to prepare for a flight review, what to expect, and understanding the process. So I wrote an article about this for Flying Magazine in December of 2024. So if you're someone who likes to read along or have a little bit more context, you can go pull up that article and I'll link it in the description below. Flight review is formerly known as a BFR. You may be, if you've been around the industry for a little while, you may have heard the term BFR. It stands for Biennial Flight Review. The FAA did rename it. The technical name now is no longer BFR. The technical name now is Flight Review, because they wanted to encourage pilots to get a flight review done more frequently than every 2 years. So a flight review is required every 24 calendar months for pilots to complete. This is outside of if you work for a company, an airline, some kind of operation that has their own internal systems for doing pilot checks and recurrent training. This is more for Part 91 general aviation people who need a way to keep their license current. So this currency check is to just keep your certificate valid as a pilot. And there are several ways to meet the requirements of a flight review. So a flight review in itself is not mandatory if you are able to meet the requirements in other ways. So there's a few ways that you can do this. One, I kind of mentioned earlier, but if you take a new check ride and pass and gain a new level of certificate or gain a new rating, that resets the clock on your flight review. So for example, if you became a private pilot, 6 months later you got your instrument rating, now the clock resets at the time of your instrument rating, and 24 months from then is when you would be due for a flight review. Another way that you can satisfy the requirements of a flight review is to complete a portion of the WINGS program. The WINGS program is put on by the FAA safety team, also known as FAST. They have this huge internal library of pilot proficiency programs, activities that you can check off with a CFI or another certified person. A DPE would be able to do that for you as well. And if you're not a member of the WINGS program, I highly recommend that you become one because it is free to you. It includes so many free resources and courses and workshops, when you complete portions of the WINGS program, that is recorded in the FAA database. They can go into the WINGS program and see, okay, this person has been active, they've been completing these safety checks, they've been keeping up on training and learning and refreshing their knowledge. You can create kind of a barrier for yourself, a little bit of a protection that just gives you a little bit of a leg up in a rough situation. Something more minor like a possible pilot deviation that leads into an investigation, something like that. Aside from the protection aspect, it's also just a great way to be keeping your knowledge current and keeping up with things that the FAA is putting out, because they put out new trainings and things on there pretty regularly. So with the WINGS credit, there are flying activities and there are learning on the ground activities. And the learning on the ground activities you can typically check off yourself by just going through the modules, taking a little test at the end, and then it's recorded internally that you went through that and you took the test. The flying credits you can't give to yourself, but you can present these activities to a CFI and say, I would like to get these checked off for WINGS credits, go up and fly with them, and then when you come back down, they can sign you off and give you that credit. So instead of having to go in for a flight review, you would actually have all portions of it covered at that point. There are specific things you have to do. You can't do just any flight activity. It has to be one of the ones listed on the website. But go in there and look around, because there are a lot of options. And then you don't have to spend the money and time on doing a formal flight review. And there are other exceptions. Some pilots, like flight instructors and glider pilots, have their own exceptions when it comes to what needs to be included in their flight review. They may qualify for some kind of abbreviated flight review, but you would have to look more into Part 61 requirements and regulations to get all the details on that, because we're not going to cover that here. So what is required of a flight review? You have to have 1 hour flight and 1 hour ground with a certified flight instructor or a qualified person to conduct a flight review. And aside from that, it is incredibly vague, and the flight review outline is non-existent. The details of what must be required are really up to the CFI at the end of the day. The FAA does give some suggestions on what to include, but the only part that is mandated is the 1 hour flight and the 1 hour ground. So I think when I was a private pilot and studying in flight school, going through all my ratings, my perception of a flight review was that it would be like a mini check ride. And honestly, it's not quite as intense as a check ride. So I don't want you going in thinking that you're going to fail, because there is no failing a flight review. Either you pass and you get signed off, or you get recommended for further training. And the recommendation is informal. It's not written anywhere. That's just a conversation with you and whoever is conducting your flight review, saying, okay, I think we need to work a little bit more on these things before I can sign you off. So we're not going to complete it today, but we'll schedule a time to go through what we need to go through so that you can receive the endorsement at the end of the day. What is this? Okay, there we go. So the ground review should cover general rules for operating under Part 91. This is a way for you to refresh your memory, but also it's a chance for the instructor who's giving you the review to lead the discussion, to ask questions, to test your knowledge, and then to share relevant updates to anything that's going on in your area. Maybe some local airspace has changed. Maybe there's been an update to regulations. I know right now the big conversations for me are, for example, changes recently to Basic Med, changes to the Nashville airspace. By the way, this is a square of the old Nashville airport carpet, just a little fun fact. Basically, the overall goal of the flight review is to enhance safety. So this is a time for you to bring your best performance. Don't come in unprepared, but also know that this is a time you're allowed to ask questions. You're allowed to request certain things with most instructors. I don't know, maybe check with your instructor in advance. But what I like to do as an instructor giving a flight review is I come with a plan of action for our flight ahead of time, but I will also ask the person that I'm reviewing beforehand if there's anything specific they would like to review or practice, because maybe I have planned normal landings, go around, steep turns, stalls, and maybe they want to practice something like a lazy 8 or a power off 180 or something like that. Something that's a little beyond what we would normally do, but I'm happy to include that in the plan of action and give them a chance to practice, because once you're out there flying on your own, you're probably not going to be working with CFIs very much anymore. So it's a chance to have another set of eyes on what you're doing and give you some feedback and pointers. Before you're meeting with your examiner or instructor, they are likely going to give you a list of items to study beforehand, but they may not. They might not do that. So if you're not sure what to review, because when you think about what could be included in an hour, anything could be included in an hour, but probably not everything. So it's best to do a general overview of Part 91 regulations, but also just basics around weather, flight planning, things like that. I always recommend to people that are doing a review with me to go through the Wings Flight Review Prep course. I will also link that below. You do need to have an account with FAST in their Wings program, but like I said, it's free, and this Flight Review Prep course is also free. So it's just highly recommend. It's very simple to go through. It's not anything that should be shocking or brand new to you. And even if things that you review in this prep course don't come up in your flight review, they are still good things to be familiar with and to refresh your memory on. If you are feeling rusty and you feel like the prep course isn't going to be quite enough for you, I recommend going through an actual ground school course. There are many to choose from. I'm going to link below some options that I recommend. They're going to cost you a little bit of money, maybe a few $100s, but if you are really feeling like your memory is just not there and you need a little bit of extra work, I don't think it's ever a bad idea to get more information. So that could be a great way to just spend a weekend going through one of these courses. In your pre-flight planning, you'll want to think about a couple big things. So with the aircraft that you're testing in, is this an aircraft that you own or you rent, or is this an aircraft that someone else is providing? Is it something you are familiar with? Do you fly it regularly, or have you never flown it? Become very familiar with the aircraft that you're going to be flying so that you can talk knowledgeably about the systems, performance charts, checklists, limitations, all of those things. And because a flight review is intended to simulate real-world flying, but also support the real-world flying that you are actually doing, a lot of reviewers like to assign a cross-country flight plan as preliminary work. So this is where it is a little bit similar to a check ride. You may get a cross-country assignment in advance. I tend to assign a cross-country plan, but I always encourage the pilot to plan it as though they're actually going to fly it. Use whatever tools, software, whatever you would normally use. I'm not going to test you on how to use a manual E6B. I'm not going to make you pull out a paper chart if you don't usually use a paper chart. So each reviewer is going to be different. Every instructor will run their reviews a little bit differently, but that's just how I do it. I do ask my pilots to complete a weight and balance, complete fuel requirement calculations, come up with current weather conditions, possible alternates, all of those things. And we're going to actually sit down and review the charts, the NOTAMs, the airport information, everything around this pretend flight. So you go in as if you're really going to fly it. What this does is it creates a foundation for us to snowball the conversation into a million other places. We can take your flight plan and talk about all kinds of things. We can talk about sectional charts, we can talk about airport operations, we can talk about regulations, the I'm safe checklist. All these different things can be built off of the foundation of your flight plan. And when it comes to the flight, again, I will send in advance a plan of what we're going to do, the things we're going to check off today. So if you're someone who wants to practice those things in advance, then at least you have a little bit of lead time to go up with maybe another instructor, or maybe go up on your own and just brush up on some maneuvers that maybe you haven't done in a while. The recency of experience will help you feel more prepared as well, which is huge. So even if you're not going up practicing maneuvers, just getting in an airplane, the week before or a couple days before your review can just kind of help shake off some rust and get you back in the zone to perform as well as you can on your review. So at the end of your review, your examiner will either endorse you for another 2 years of flying or they'll recommend further training. Whichever way it goes, they'll debrief the lesson with you. They'll give you notes on what went well and what can be improved. If you do need further training, they'll either schedule you for more or come up with a plan of action that they recommend for you. And after your flight review, keep up that proficiency. Continue going through wings courses, continue flying as much as possible. Just be proactive, stay on top of those regulatory changes and best practices. Staying current is one thing, but it's up to you as the pilot to keep up your proficiency. If that means scheduling more dual time with an instructor, getting in a simulator, whatever that looks like for you, it is just best to not wait until 2 years has passed to start refreshing your memory. So I hope this helps give you a little bit better context. If you do need a flight review in Tennessee, hit me up. As of early 2025, I am still conducting flight reviews. I fly out of Sparta, Upper Cumberland Airport in Sparta, Tennessee. It's just south of Cookeville if you're familiar. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any videos, and I will see you in the next one.